Well, it's official. Larry Page, co-founder of Google, is now the CEO as of today. Eric Schmidt has moved into the role of executive chairman. Under Schmidt's leadership, the company became the most popular search engine in the world and grew to 24,000 employees. Page, Schmidt, and his co-founder Sergey Brin made decisions together, all three of them, the triumvirate, if you will. But Page says Google paid the price for slow decision-making. He wants Google to be faster and more nimble in this next phase. Well, joining us now on Bloomberg West is Ken Auletta, author of 11 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Googled, The End of the World as We Know It. He's also a staff writer at The New Yorker. Ken comes to us from our studios in New York. Ken, thanks for joining us here on Bloomberg West. So I guess the big question is, how will Larry be different, and can he handle this big job?
We don't know whether he can handle the job. He'll try to be different in that Larry is a guy, every meeting I attended there that Larry was in, he was constantly pushing the engineers. Aim for the moon, not the top of the trees. You're not being bold enough. And Sergey Brin, his partner and dear friend, always agreed with him. They share that view. So I think he will try to put more oomph into Google and try and make it more audacious. The question, and one of the reasons he feels so strongly about this, it's not just because this has always been his attitude when he created, with great audacity, Google in 1998. It's also because Facebook is in his head. It's in Google's head. They are very preoccupied and concerned that Facebook is stealing its thunder, stealing its engineers, stealing some of the cachet that went with Google for 10 years.
So my question is, where does Sergey stand in all of this? Is Larry really the sole decider, or is he going to consult with Sergey on most decisions?
They share an office. They are brothers, and there is no space between them. Larry Page has always been the one who had more aptitude and interest in being a CEO, as he was before Eric Schmidt was recruited. Sergey Brin is perfectly comfortable with that. Sergey will go off and do his scientific quests and other things, but they talk all the time. You would watch them in a meeting, and they literally had sign language between each other. They can anticipate each other's words.
Ken, it's great to see you. First of all, we're glad you're on the show. Let me ask about Larry in terms of his business chops. In the time you spent around them and writing the book, did you get a sense that Larry, in addition to being an engineer, had any sense of the sort of business acumen that it takes to run a business, to look at a P&L, to understand what makes things run?
Oh, he certainly has read a fair number of business books and been instructed by them. He certainly can read a balance sheet and financial reports. A basic question I have about Larry Page is basically asocial. He doesn't like talking to the press. He doesn't like talking to investors. He doesn't like giving public speeches. Well, the CEO is on a public stage. And how is he going to migrate from the private stage he is comfortable on to a very public stage, which a CEO has to occupy? And if he is not comfortable on that stage, what's the substitute? Who's going to do that for him? And that's one of the basic questions here. Larry Page is someone who, when you talk to him, oftentimes, not always, but sometimes, he'll be looking down and you'll see the top of his forehead. You can't do that with the CEO.
Well, let me ask a question. Is the studying of being an executive something he's taken on lately, or is it part of his DNA? Is it how he grew up? Has he been thinking about being a businessman, not an engineer, his whole life? Because it's one thing to get a crash course. It's a different thing to think that way.
He has thought about it an awful lot. This is a brilliant young man, and he's thought a lot about business and being a businessman. And if you go back and read their IPO when they went public in 2004, it was a letter from he and Sergey Brin, which he wrote that first one. And it's all about how we're going to be a different kind of company. We are not going to follow the customs of Wall Street. We're going to think long term, and we're going to make decisions in the long-term interests of our shareholders, which is why they announced we're going to have two classes of stock, and we're going to control the majority of that stock, so we can make intelligent long-term decisions. So he's thought an awful lot about this. But there's a difference between translating thought into action. And one of the things a leader has to do is inspire. He inspires by his example. He's the founder, co-founder, and people are inspired by that at Google, and they've gotten rich because of him. But do you inspire the rest of the world, the press, the shareholders, other CEOs, the partners? You've got to go out now. Google has to go out and sell Hollywood studios and television networks networks to provide them product for YouTube. They've got to go out and sell a new book settlement with publishers and authors. That takes some salesmanship. Is that Larry Page's skill set? Questionable.
Well, and I wonder, Ken, is he the font of that inspiration also? I mean, that letter in their IPO was an amazing document, but the spirit of the company as a startup is one thing. The spirit of this 10-year-old company. Is Larry the source of that kind of inspiration, or is he got to take them back to the way the company hasn't been in quite a while?
No, he knows that Google is in a business now where they need partners, and they're in a business where they have to worry about governments in the U.S., the European Union. You talked earlier about the Swiss government, China. All governments all over the world are raising questions about them. The problem that Google confronts is that the engineering skill that you have is based on things you can measure, which is algorithms, which is Google's initial great strength. But now when you're dealing with governments and with people and with issues like copyright and issues like privacy and issues like fear, you can't measure that. You need emotional intelligence for that. And that's not something that most engineers or many engineers come with.
And when this news was first announced that Eric Schmidt would be moving into the role of executive chairman, you were the first person I heard suggest that he might be considered for Secretary of Commerce. What do you know about that now? And if he is offered this job, will he accept?
I know zero, and I don't know whether he would accept or not. The question, as Paul said, Eric Schmidt has done a fabulous job in the 10 years he's been at the helm of Google, as anyone would acknowledge. And obviously, he would bring an input to the Obama administration, and he has a real relationship with them. He's on Obama's Economic Advisory Council that would be very helpful, potentially, to helping the administration understand Silicon Valley and the tech world. Whether he will get the offer, I don't know. Whether he would accept the offer, I don't know.
Many people who know Eric Schmidt very well, though, say he has kind of the heart and soul of a policy wonk. And you suggested in your New Yorker article that China, pulling out of China, may have been Eric Schmidt's biggest disappointment and may have encouraged him to actually pull back from his role as CEO. I mean, what can you tell us more about that? Well,
he disagreed with the decision to pull back from China, which was driven largely by Sergey Brin, joined by Larry Page, his co-founder. Eric disagreed with that. Eric Schmidt thought that you have to be in the largest consumer market in an aggressive way, and you have to bend a little more than Brin and Page were willing to bend. He got very dispirited about that last spring, and in fact, at some point by Labor Day, one of the members of the board talked to him and said, you know, Eric, can you still get the enthusiasm, because you've really kind of been moving away from Google. He said, no, I think I'm back. And then he found out he wasn't back. And by December, he communicated that it was time to go.
Ken, let me ask about that also. I mean, is there a sense that that's almost a moral choice, that this do no evil, be a good company that does good things, is going to be much more in the forefront for Google today? Because they've got some big challenges, and it's one of the biggest companies in the world right now.
They are, but I think we should not get trapped into their slogan, "Don't be evil." Is Google generally done very admirable things? Of course, but what does "don't be evil" mean? I mean, if you compromise, is that evil? If you fire someone, is that evil? They've done both. That doesn't make them evil, nor does it make them necessarily good. The truth of the matter is that in the world, Google has gone from a technology company, which at their heart they still are, but they're a relationship company now too. They need to relate to advertisers and movie studios and telephone companies and software companies and television companies. And so they're dealing in relationships. And that's a world where you have to compromise in order to have a relationship with people, because everyone has different interests.
Ken, Larry has said part of his strategy will be to empower other top executives at Google. Can you tell us who these top executives might be? And are we going to see more of them rather than Larry Page, because he is such an introvert and doesn't like the press very much?
Well, they have a lot of very top executives there, I can name 10, but why do that? The question is, no one knows at this point what Larry Page, who he will lean on, who he will say, well, let's get rid of that person. So who will come forward? If anyone will come forward, I don't know. Generally speaking, you would think that the market and the people in other businesses would want to be dealing with the CEO. The question is, does Larry Page want to deal with them? And if he doesn't, how does Google carry on a relationship business?
Ken, is there a sense down there that people are paranoid? You know, the greatest companies in Silicon Valley have gone on with a paranoia that their lunch could be eaten any day. Google seems to expand its empire away from search to whatever they want to conquer next. It's a different sort of feeling down there. Did you get a sense they're worried about their core assets?
Yeah, of course they are, and they should be, and everyone should be. Since Andy Grove wrote that great book, Only the Paranoid Survive, when he was running Intel many years ago, that is a valuable piece of advice for any company to look over your shoulder, worry, not to become immobilized by it. But as I mentioned earlier, I think Google is very preoccupied and with Facebook. Now, there's a danger of becoming too preoccupied, too paranoid. But you've got to look over your shoulder, and you've got to say, if you're Google, you know, we haven't lost market share in search, but we haven't gained any in places like China. We've actually lost market share in China. We've lost market share in Russia. So, and we haven't done particularly well in social networking. And we're losing some engineers and some top executives. So we got, and we've lost the buzz, the feeling that Google is the company of tomorrow. And we've lost a lot of that to Facebook. So you've got to be a little paranoid about that and worry about that. But every company has to worry and not get too comfortable.
Quickly, Ken, would you say that there's a risk of making potentially strategic mixed steps that would lead Google down the path of becoming Yahoo rather than becoming a stronger, innovative company that's at the forefront of the world of technology?
I think people miss two things that are going on that are really huge for Google. Search is still strong and still growing, not as fast as it once did. But there are 5 billion cell phones, mobile phones in the world. Google now has more operating systems for those cell phones than any other company, including Apple and BlackBerry and Nokia. That is huge, and they will figure out a way with their Android operating system to monetize that, as they figured out a way how to monetize search. The second thing is YouTube. 40% of all the internet videos are on YouTube. They are making money now on YouTube, and that is a rocket just going up. So I think they have two growth engines.
All right, Ken and Auletta, thank you so much for your insight. Google certainly has a number of billion-dollar opportunities out there. We'll see how they capitalize on those.